So Serenity has something written on her book, which is incredibly important, probably more important than anything else you'll learn in this class. I mean, we can teach you a bunch of stuff in classrooms like this, and hopefully we learn it together. I'm going to draw this out of you today, I think, if history is a guide. Serenity has 2 words written in her book, and the 2 words are...
Define better.
Define better. Remember I said, pick which student is better and tell me why. The first question you have to ask is, what is better? What is better? And let me give you an example. Give you an example of an actual study that I just consumed relatively recently. If you multitask using social media, and say for example you're trying to drive down the road while you're texting, there's been a study that's shown that multitaskers do everything kind of piss poor. So you're doing lots of stuff, but you're doing none of it optimally. Now, that sounds logical. It sounds perfectly logical that that would be the case. One study that I've seen, it's actually interesting, a car and driver study, shows that if you're reading a text while you're driving, that's actually worse than driving drunk, as far as braking distance is defined. So that's one way of defining it. You can't really define attentiveness with a driver, but you can measure something like a braking distance. How long does it take after they put a red dot on the windshield to actually come to a complete stop going 25 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour? The study I mentioned before about multitasking, it was done at Stanford University, which I think you've all heard of. And they broke their folks down into groups, a control group who does not use multimedia, no multitasking at all, and then LMMs and HMMs, light media multitaskers and heavy media multitaskers. Now, their conclusion was that the heavy media multitaskers, the people that multitask the most, do worse on assessments when they are tested on what they just consumed multitasking than the LMMs or the NMMs, the non-media multitaskers. What's the first question I ask?
Better student.
Say that again, Richie?
Better student.
Well, no, that's your question. The first question I asked for Stanford was,
what is heavy media?
What makes a heavy media multitasker different than a light media multitasker, and what makes them different than a non-media? Why wouldn't low be non, or non be low? And what they said a definition. They said if they spend more than blah % of time doing blah. Always look for those definitions. Always look for those definitions. When they say coffee raises blood pressure, when they say coffee raises blood pressure or lowers blood pressure or coffee does this or coffee does that, ask them what they're measuring and how they define up and down. We're getting into that today. Part of today's lesson is to learn one measure of defining up, down, or different. But you always have to ask that question. Define better, define different, define change. Because any statistic can say anything. I've got a couple great examples here momentarily. But you have to say, is it a meaningful better? Or is it a meaningful worse? Or is it a meaningful higher or meaningful lower? And sometimes the answer is no, it's not. But that doesn't stop the news from putting it in a headline. So as I'm wandering around being nosy, I wanted to make sure I brought that. Rebecca, go ahead.
Where do you think the best place to put that is, that definition if you're conducting research?
You have to put it in, this is a great question, where do you think the best place to put that is? Right in what's called, what's the part of the, help me out here, those of you that have read journals before.
Abstract?
It's in the abstract, right after the abstract they usually put, what's it called when they describe the experiment? Methods, thank you, the methods of, that's what you, right then. Stanford put that right in the beginning. They said, here's what we define as a light media multitasker, heavy media multitasker. They had the definitions right there. Now, once you've defined that, you can then see if they're different or not. But that doesn't mean you can't question the definition. That doesn't mean you can't question the definition. I mean, this happens all the time. How many of you guys heard about 2 years ago, the rate of autism in this country skyrocketed from 1 in 150 to 1 in 100. Skyrocketed, okay? And people were going, oh my God, autism. And then all of a sudden we're not giving our kids vaccines because we read a story once that if you give kids a bunch of vaccines, they're autistic. Time out. What's also not been said is what happened about 2 years ago.
Change the definition.
They reclassified certain conditions as autism. For example, I believe
Asperger's
is now autistic. Asperger's is now autism where it wasn't before. Well, if all of a sudden you loop Asperger's kids in the autistic group, that's going to define quite a bit of that jump. Nothing really changed. Maybe better detection, possibly. Because maybe, I'm putting maybe out there, Lauren, but the definition changed, which gives this kind of weird view of a rate change. It's like saying there's a higher percentage of people that are being diagnosed with breast cancer now than 50 years ago. It's because the tests are better than they were 50 years ago. We're actually catching more of them before they die. People are living long enough to get tested and detected before they die from it. I mean, not to be morbid, but I mean, that's the idea, is that sometimes the definitions hide. The numerical calculations are a foregone conclusion, is what I'm getting at here. All these numerical calculations we're going to do today are awesome, but they're a foregone conclusion, honestly, in view of the definition of how you define your study. So yeah, I couldn't help but mention that. It's so important. So thank you for writing that on the margin of your notebook there.